Welcome to African Folktales by Mazi, where ancient voices still speak and forgotten warnings still matter. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tell us where you are watching from in the comments section. Then turn on your notification. This is not a story meant to comfort you. It is a story meant to wake you. In the quiet town of Eziama, faith was not just believed, it was obeyed. The church stood at the center of the town like a watchful eye, its tall cross visible from every road. The bell controlled life itself. It rang at dawn to wake prayers, at noon to remind traitors of honesty, and at night to warn sinners that God never slept. The people trusted the church because they trusted Pastor Daniel. He was soft-spoken, always smiling, always holding his Bible close. People said the Bible was his shield and his sword. Children loved him, women trusted him, men feared disappointing him. No one questioned him. That was the first mistake. Kalu was 12 years old when he learned that holy things could hide dark truths. He was thin, quiet, and observant, the kind of boy adults forgot was listening. His father had died years earlier, and the church became his second home. Pastor Daniel paid his school fees and called him my son. When the pastor chose Kalu to help inside the church, everyone praised God. Kalu cleaned the altar, arranged the chairs, and stayed late after evening prayers. He loved the silence of the church when everyone left. The stained glass glowed softly, and the air felt calm. But one evening, as Kalu wiped the pulpit, he heard a sound that did not belong. A slow scraping sound came from behind the altar, low and careful, like something being hidden. Kalu froze. The church doors were locked. The building was empty. His heart beat fast as the sound came again. When he stepped closer, cold air brushed his face. He noticed something he had never seen before. A thin line in the stone behind the cross, too straight to be a crack, too neat to be old. Kalu swallowed hard. For the first time, the church did not feel holy. It felt guarded. And somewhere deep inside him, a quiet voice whispered that faith without questions was how secrets survived. The next morning, Eziama woke to fear. Adaeze was missing. She was 19. Known for her gentle smile and strong voice during hymns, she had attended evening prayers and never made it home. By sunrise, her sandals were found near the church path, neatly placed as if she had stopped willingly. The town gathered fast. Whispers spread faster than truth. Some blamed the forest, some blamed spirits, some said God was angry. Pastor Daniel stood before the crowd, Bible pressed tightly to his chest. His voice was calm, smooth, practiced. "Fear not," he said. "The Lord reveals all things in his time." People nodded. They always did. But Kalu noticed the pastor's hands. They shook just a little. That day, the church felt different. Silence followed Pastor Daniel. Wherever he walked, Kalu followed too, his mind heavy with the memory of the hidden line behind the altar. When evening came, the pastor called him closer. "You look troubled, my son," Pastor Daniel said. Kalu forced a smile. "Just tired, sir." The pastor studied him for a moment, then placed a hand on his shoulder. It felt heavy, pressing him down. "Faith means trusting, even when you do not understand," Pastor Daniel said slowly. "Questions invite doubt. Doubt invites sin." Kalu nodded, but his stomach tightened. That night, sleep refused to come. Adaeze's face appeared every time he closed his eyes. Then he remembered the cold air behind the altar, the sound, the seam, before fear could stop him. Kalu made a decision. He would return to the church after midnight, not to pray, not to clean, but to see the truth for himself. The moon was high when Kalu slipped out of his house. The town slept, wrapped in false peace. Crickets sang, and distant dogs barked as he moved quietly toward the church. Every step felt heavy, like the ground was warning him to turn back. The church doors were locked, just as he expected. But the loose window at the back welcomed him like an open mouth. He climbed inside and landed softly on the cold floor. The air smelled old, thick with dust and secrets. Shadows stretched across the walls, bending the shapes of crosses and scriptures into something unfamiliar. Kalu's heart pounded so loudly he feared it would give him away. He walked slowly toward the altar, every verse on the wall seeming to watch him. When he knelt and pressed his fingers against the thin line in the stone, it moved. A quiet click echoed through the church. The stone slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. Cold air rushed up, sharp and foul, carrying the smell of damp earth and decay. Kalu gagged and covered his mouth. This was no holy place. This was a hiding place. He stood frozen, fear screaming at him to run. Adaeze's missing face burned in his mind. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the first stair. The steps were uneven and wet, carved roughly as if made in a hurry. Faint light flickered below. As he descended, the walls closed in, and the air grew heavier. At the bottom, he entered a small underground room. His breath caught. Chains hung from the walls. Rusted but strong. In the corner lay a figure, curled and shaking. "Adaeze," Kalu whispered. Her eyes opened slowly, hollow with fear, when she saw him. Tears rolled down her face. "They said God wanted this," she whispered weakly. "They used the Bible. They said obedience was holy." Kalu's chest burned with anger. He reached for her hand. Then footsteps echoed. Above, the stone began to slide shut. Light disappeared as a calm voice drifted down the stairs. "Kalu." Pastor Daniel called softly. "Come back up. Let us talk." Kalu's body went cold. Adaeze tried to stand, but collapsed against the wall. Her strength gone. The stone above them moved slowly, grinding like a warning. Pastor Daniel's footsteps were steady, unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. "You should not be here," the pastor said, his voice calm and controlled. "This place is not meant for young minds." Kalu stepped in front of Adaeze, his legs shaking, but firm. "You took her," he said. "You hid her here and called it God's will." Pastor Daniel stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The dim light revealed his face. No longer gentle, no longer kind. "People believe what faith teaches them to believe," he replied. "The Bible is powerful. It silences doubt. It makes people obey without questions." He lifted the Bible slightly. "With this, truth becomes whatever I say it is." Kalu's heart pounded, but anger rose stronger than fear. "God does not hurt people," Kalu said. "You do." The pastor's eyes hardened. "Children are meant to listen, not judge," he said, stepping closer. "You saw something you should not have seen." Before Kalu could react, a loud bang echoed from above. The stone door jerked, then slid open. Light poured down the staircase. Shouts filled the church. "Police! Do not move!" Several officers rushed down with torches and weapons raised. Behind them were townspeople, wide-eyed and shaking. Kalu's mother pushed forward, tears streaming down her face. She had followed him when fear woke her, and when she saw him enter the church, she had run for help. Pastor Daniel froze. The Bible slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull sound. In that moment, the power he carried disappeared. He was just a man standing in the dark, exposed. The officers moved in and placed him in handcuffs. Adaeze began to cry, not from fear, but from relief. As they led Pastor Daniel away, the church stood silent, its walls unable to hide the truth any longer. Morning came, without the sound of the church bell, for the first time in anyone's memory. Eziama woke in silence. News spread quickly, heavier than fear. Pastor Daniel had been arrested. The same man who blessed children and spoke of heaven had been hiding darkness beneath the altar. People gathered outside the church, not to pray, but to stare. Some cried, some argued, some refused to believe. Adaeze was taken to the hospital under police watch. Her body was weak, but her voice was strong enough to tell the truth. She spoke of prayers that turned into threats, of Bible verses twisted into chains, of obedience forced through fear. Every word cracked the image the town had built for years. The police searched the church carefully. They found hidden passages, locked rooms, records written in careful handwriting. Sermon notes sat beside lists of names. Every discovery made the crowd quieter. Kalu stayed close to his mother, her arm wrapped tightly around him. People looked at him differently now, not as a helper boy, but as the one who had seen what others refused to see. He did not feel brave. He felt sick. He kept thinking of how many prayers he had whispered in that same building, unaware of what lived beneath it. By evening, Pastor Daniel was driven away. Past worshippers watched in stunned silence as the man they trusted bowed his head, no Bible in his hands. That night, elders met without hymns or candles. They spoke of guilt. They spoke of blindness. They spoke of how faith had been used to silence questions. Children listened from doorways, learning too early that authority could lie. Kalu lay awake long after dark. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had opened a door that could never be closed again. And deep inside him, he knew this was only the beginning. The secret had been uncovered, but the damage it caused would take far longer to heal. Eziama had lost its innocence, and nothing, not even prayer, could bring it back. The days after the arrest felt heavier than the nights. Eziama moved slowly, as if the town itself was wounded. People avoided the church path. They spoke in low voices, Afraid that walls might still listen, some defended Pastor Daniel, saying he was being tested by God. Others felt anger rise each time they remembered how easily they had believed him. The Bible, once carried openly, was now held carefully, like something that could cut if touched wrongly. Adaeze remained in the hospital, guarded and questioned. She told her story again and again, each time shaking, but clear. She spoke of how Pastor Daniel had called her into the church office for prayers, how his voice had changed when the doors closed, how scripture became a weapon instead of comfort. She said he told her obedience was proof of faith and silence was proof of holiness. When the police asked why she did not scream, tears filled her eyes. I thought God would punish me if I did, she said. That answer haunted the town. Kalu returned to school, but nothing felt normal. His classmates stared at him. Some whispered that he was chosen by God. Others whispered that he had brought shame to the church. Teachers spoke gently, unsure of what words were safe. Every sound reminded Kalu of that night. The scraping stone, the cold air, the chains. He began to understand that truth. One scene never leaves quietly. One afternoon, an elder named Naji visited Kalu's home. He was old, respected, and known for wisdom. You did well, Naji said, but his eyes were sad. Yet understand this, the truth you uncovered will fight back. Kalu frowned. Fight how? Naji sighed. People fear losing what they believed. They will protect the lie because it feels safer than accepting they were wrong. That night, stones hit the side of Kalu's house. A voice shouted from the dark, calling him a traitor. His mother pulled him close, her hands shaking. Kalu realized then that exposing the secret had not ended the danger. It had only changed its shape, and somewhere beyond the town, others who hid behind holy words were listening carefully. By the next week, Eziama was divided. The truth had cracked the town into pieces that no one knew how to put back together. Some families refused to speak to others. Old friends crossed the road to avoid each other. Those who had loved Pastor Daniel the most now defended him the loudest. They said Adaeze was lying. They said Kalu had been influenced by evil. They said the Bible could never be used for harm. Kalu heard the whispers everywhere. In the market. In school, even near his home. One afternoon, as he walked back from school, two older boys blocked his path. You think you're special, one of them sneered. You think you know better than God. Kalu tried to step around them, but they shoved him back. If you hadn't gone snooping, none of this would have happened, the other said. Kalu's chest tightened. He was hurting people. Kalu said quietly, that is not God. The boys laughed and walked away, but their words stayed like bruises. That evening, Kalu's mother warned him to stay inside. People are angry, she said. Anger makes people dangerous. At the same time, strangers began to arrive in Eziama. Journalists came with cameras and notebooks. They asked questions that made elders uncomfortable. They asked how long the church had hidden secrets. They asked who else knew. Police officers returned again and again, measuring walls, lifting floors, searching records. Hidden rooms became public shame. The church was closed, its doors sealed with red tape. Some people cried when they saw it. Others felt relief. Adaeze was released from the hospital, but moved to a relative's home outside town. She could not bear to walk past the church. Her nightmares followed her everywhere. One evening, she sent word asking to see Kalu. When they met, she held his hands tightly. They say you destroyed the church, she whispered, but you saved me. Kalu shook his head. I only opened a door. Adaeze looked at him with tired eyes. Sometimes opening a door is the bravest thing. As night fell, Kalu sensed something shifting. The secret was no longer buried. It was spreading. And with every new truth revealed, someone somewhere was growing afraid. The trial began 3 months later, and Eziama had never seen anything like it. People traveled from nearby towns to watch. The courthouse overflowed, and those who could not enter stood outside, listening through open windows. Pastor Daniel sat behind the wooden rail, dressed simply, no Bible in his hands. His calm smile was gone, replaced by a hard, empty stare. Adaeze testified first. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. She spoke of trust turned into fear, of prayers whispered while chains waited below. She described the hidden rooms, the cold floor, the verses spoken like commands. When she finished, the room was silent. Some people cried, others looked away. Kalu testified next. He felt small standing there, but he spoke clearly. He told them about the sound behind the altar, the hidden seam, the night he went back alone, when he described finding Adaeze. A low murmur spread through the crowd. The defense tried to break him. "You are a child," the lawyer said. "Children imagine things." Kalu lifted his head. "I saw chains," he said. "Chains are not imagination." That sentence spread through the town like fire. The police presented evidence, hidden passages, papers filled with names, dates written beside Bible verses. The truth stood solid, heavy, impossible to deny. Still, some people refused to accept it. They said the church was being attacked. They said faith was under trial, not a man. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was firm. "No holy book gives permission for cruelty," he said. "No title places a person above the law." Pastor Daniel was found guilty. The sentence was long. When he was led away, he did not look at anyone. He did not look at Kalu. He did not look at Adaeze. Outside, the crowd stood unsure of what to feel. There was justice, but no celebration. That night, Kalu sat quietly with his mother. "Is it over now?" he asked. She shook her head gently. "Truth never ends," she said. "It only moves forward." And Kalu understood that what began under the church had now entered the world, where it would keep demanding answers. The days after the trial were strange. Eziama seemed quieter, but not peaceful. People walked carefully, as if touching the wrong word or glance could open old wounds. The church remained closed, its doors boarded and chained. Some nights, shadows flickered across its windows, and children whispered about the evil that had lived beneath the altar. Adaeze stayed with her aunt outside town, but she wrote letters to Kalu each week. Tiny notes filled with fear, hope, and questions about what justice really meant. Kalu read each one carefully, holding them as if they were precious beside him. His mother tried to keep life normal. She cooked, cleaned, and reminded him to eat. But the air of suspicion lingered. The townspeople looked at Kalu differently now, some with respect, others with blame. Some whispered that he had destroyed faith, that he had brought shame to the Bible itself. Kalu could not understand why adults struggled to separate truth from religion. He only knew that silence had been dangerous, that obedience had been weaponized, and that he could not unsee what he had seen. One evening, a group of elders approached his house. They spoke in hushed tones. "Careful not to frighten him. You must be careful, child," one said, "even after Pastor Daniel is gone. Some believe he was right. They do not forgive easily." Kalu nodded, gripping the letters from Adaeze. He had made a choice, and that choice had consequences that even he could not control. The next morning, he returned to school, but nothing felt ordinary. Every hallway reminded him of whispers. Every classroom reminded him that faith without questioning could hide horrors. Eziama was learning slowly that truth is louder than sermons, and questions are stronger than prayers. And Kalu, though just a boy, had become its unlikely teacher. Weeks passed, and the town of Eziama began to change, slowly, painfully. People spoke more cautiously, but they began to ask questions they had never dared before. Mothers whispered to daughters about trust. Children began to notice the small cracks in authority. Even the new pastor, gentle and quiet, encouraged them to think for themselves. But some townspeople resisted. They wanted the old comfort of unquestioning faith. They missed Pastor Daniel's calm voice, the sense that everything made sense when the Bible was read aloud. Kalu noticed the tension everywhere. He walked past the closed church daily, each glance at the boarded doors reminding him of the hidden room, the chains, the fear that had lived there. He still remembered Adaeze's trembling hands and the way her eyes had begged him to act. He could not forget. And he could not forgive the silence of the town that had allowed it to happen. One evening, as he helped his mother in the kitchen, a neighbor came rushing in. Out of breath, Kalu saw it. "Someone has seen Pastor Daniel in another town. He claims the Bible still protects him." Kalu froze. His stomach turned over. "Another town has." "Yes," she said. "They say he is gathering followers. He says he has done nothing wrong." Kalu's fists clenched. He had hoped the trial would end it all, but the truth, he realized, was not a simple thing. The Bible, once a shield for good, had been twisted into a weapon, and the man who wielded it was still at large. Somewhere beyond the hills, Pastor Daniel was telling lies and convincing others that obedience was the same as faith. Kalu's mother put her hand on his shoulder. "You did what you could," she said softly. "Some battles are bigger than one, child." But Kalu knew he could not stay silent. The Memory of chains, of Adaeze, of the scene behind the altar, demanded action. He had learned that when faith is misused. The following weeks, Kalu became more careful. He watched the town, listened to whispers, and recorded small details in a notebook hidden beneath his bed. He noticed patterns: people who still defended Pastor Daniel, families who avoided certain roads, children who refused to speak about the church. He realized the darkness Pastor Daniel had created was not just in the hidden room, but in the minds of those who had believed him without question. Adaeze's letters continued to arrive, each one filled with fear and hope. Kalu, she wrote, he is gathering more people. They say the Bible protects him. Please be careful. Please stop him before more are hurt. Kalu read the note 3 times, his fingers trembling. He understood the weight of responsibility. He was only 12, but the truth demanded action. At school, Kalu began noticing the subtle signs of manipulation, the way some teachers spoke in double meanings, the way elders emphasized obedience over understanding. He shared what he could with trusted friends, careful not to alarm anyone unnecessarily. One afternoon, he met with Naji, the elder who had warned him before. The world is bigger than Eziama, Naji said gravely, and evil hides behind what people believe is holy. Your task now is not to fight it alone, but to be smart. Observe. Collect proof. Only then can lies be exposed. Kalu nodded, understanding the gravity of Naji's words. He felt fear, but he also felt something stronger: determination. The town of Eziama had already seen how silence could protect evil. Now, Kalu realized that speaking the truth, even in whispers, could begin to stop it. Outside, the wind stirred, rustling the leaves of the trees near the closed church. The shadows seemed to shift, reminding him that secrets did not stay buried forever. By mid-morning, Kalu began his small investigations cautiously. He followed rumors of Pastor Daniel's supporters, listened to conversations in the market, and watched the movements of strangers in town. He learned that fear could control adults as easily as children. People still feared speaking the truth, afraid of being judged or shunned. Each discovery made Kalu's notebook thicker, each detail more dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands. One afternoon, as he walked past the old church, he noticed a man lingering near the gates, glancing at the boarded doors with interest. The man's eyes were sharp, calculating, and he carried himself as if he knew something the town did not. Kalu ducked behind a tree and watched. He saw the man speak to 2 younger boys, pointing toward the windows and gesturing subtly. Kalu's heart raced. He realized that even in Eziama, Pastor Daniel's influence had not ended. The man was recruiting followers, spreading the same lies disguised as faith. Kalu ran home, careful not to be seen. He showed his mother the notebook, explaining the new danger. She listened silently, fear in her eyes. You must be very careful, she said. Do not confront them alone. They may try to use the Bible as a weapon against you. Kalu nodded, understanding the warning. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his small shoulders. He could not stop the lies entirely, but he could collect proof. He could expose them before more children or innocent people were hurt. That night, as the wind blew through the cracks in the windows, Kalu lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He knew Pastor Daniel's shadow stretched far beyond Eziama, and he knew that to protect the town and himself would have to follow it wherever it led. The following day, Kalu returned to the market, pretending to be distracted by the busy stalls. He kept one eye on the man he had seen near the church. Whenever the man spoke, people seemed to hang on his every word, nodding, smiling, afraid to disagree. Kalu realized that fear and trust were tangled together, making lies seem like truth. He followed the man discreetly as he walked toward the edge of town, where the old forest began. The man paused, whispered something to the 2 boys, and handed them small folded papers. Kalu pretended to tie his sandal, but he caught the glint of writing through the folds. He memorized the scene, his pulse quickening. He returned home and shared everything with Naji that evening. This is worse than before, Naji said, frowning. The poison has spread. You have to act, but carefully. A wrong step could alert them, and more people could be hurt. Kalu nodded. He felt fear, but also clarity. He understood that the truth was a weapon, but one that required patience. He spent the next few days observing, writing, memorizing every face, every word, every gesture. Adaeze's letters reminded him that the longer the lies spread, the harder they would be to stop. Each night, Kalu imagined the hidden rooms under the church, the chains, the cold air, And the way Pastor Daniel had used scripture to manipulate, he vowed that no one else would be trapped like that again. The town might resist. Adults might deny, but the evidence he was gathering would speak louder than sermons, louder than whispers, louder than fear. And in the quiet darkness of his room, Kalu promised himself that he would not stop until the shadow of lies was lifted from Eziama once and for all. A week later, Kalu noticed that the man had begun meeting others openly in abandoned buildings at the edge of town. Each meeting was small, secretive, but the signs of influence were clear. He watched as people arrived quietly, their eyes lowered, listening to every word the man spoke. The words were carefully twisted, full of Bible verses and promises, convincing them that obedience and silence were holy. He took notes secretly, hiding the pages under his mattress at night. Adaeze's letters came again, urging caution. "They are organizing," she wrote. "He is clever. Do not let him know you are watching." Kalu reread the letter over and over, his heart racing. Each night, the fear he felt mingled with determination. He could not ignore what was happening, but he could not rush blindly either. One afternoon, while helping his mother with errands, Kalu overheard villagers speaking in hushed tones. "Did you hear?" One said. "The old pastor's followers are planning something. I hope the children stay away." Another replied, "They say he still uses the Bible to control them." Kalu froze. Listening carefully, he realized that Eziama was already changing again, not just because of the trial, but because fear had begun to seed itself in new people. The lies were multiplying, growing like weeds in the cracks of the town's foundations. That night, he met with Naji and laid out everything he had seen. "You have proof," Naji said, examining Kalu's notes carefully. "You are doing more than anyone else, but you must be careful. The more they grow, the more dangerous they become." Kalu swallowed hard. He knew the truth could save people, but it could also make enemies. He clenched his fists, staring at the small candle flickering in the room, realizing that bravery sometimes meant standing alone in the dark while others slept. The next morning, Kalu returned to the edge of town, pretending to run errands, but really observing the abandoned buildings. He noted every face, every word, every movement. The followers of Pastor Daniel seemed ordinary, but Kalu could see the fear hidden beneath their obedience. They obeyed because they were convinced that questioning was sin. That silence was proof of holiness. Kalu's notebook grew heavier with each observation. Adaeze's letters reminded him to remain careful. "Do not let them suspect you," she wrote. "One wrong move and everything could be lost." Kalu nodded silently, imagining the chains beneath the church, the seam in the altar, the cold air that had filled the hidden room. Every memory strengthened his resolve. He realized that what had started in Eziama could spread far beyond, and the only way to stop it was to gather undeniable proof. He spoke with Naji again, showing him the notebook and pointing out patterns of recruitment and manipulation. Naji's eyes narrowed. "This is dangerous work," he said. "If you are discovered, they will use fear against you. They will try to turn the town against you. But this is the only way to protect the children." Kalu clenched his teeth. "I will do it," he said. "I cannot let anyone else suffer." That night, as he lay in bed, he thought of Adaeze and the hidden room beneath the church. He thought of Pastor Daniel's calm voice, twisting scripture to control people. He thought of the man and his followers gathering at the edge of town, plotting in shadows. Kalu understood that exposing evil was not just about one person, it was about breaking the fear that kept everyone silent, and he knew that he would not stop, even if it meant standing alone against the darkness. Over the next few days, Kalu became even more careful. He watched from hidden corners, memorizing faces, noting the times followers arrived and left, and recording every word he could overhear without being seen. Each meeting revealed more about how Pastor Daniel's influence persisted. The followers repeated the same phrases, twisting Bible verses to control and frighten the people around them. Kalu realized that fear had become their chain, stronger than the iron in the hidden room. He continued to receive letters from Adaeze, each one warning of dangers and urging patience. "He is clever," she wrote. "He knows how to hide behind scripture. You cannot let him see you collecting proof." Kalu kept her words close, reading them over and over before he slept at night. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but he also felt a growing confidence. He had seen the hidden room, he had saved Adaeze, he had spoken the truth in court. Each action reminded him that courage was built in small steps. One afternoon, as he returned from observing a meeting, He saw two of the followers waiting near the marketplace. They looked at him strangely. Whispering to each other, he froze, pretending to examine fruit on a stall. The moment passed. But Kalu's heart raced. He realized that someone might already suspect him. That evening, he met Naji and told him what had happened. "You must be cautious," Naji said, wearing etched on his face. "Fear is their weapon. If they suspect you, they may try to silence you before you can expose the rest." Kalu nodded, determination hardening in his chest. "I will be careful," he promised. "But I cannot stop now. Too many people could be hurt." The night was still, but the wind carried a whisper of movement through the trees near the church. Even in silence, Kalu felt the presence of shadows, the echo of lies still stretching across Eziama. He knew the next step would be dangerous, but he also knew that truth, once uncovered, must be shared or darkness would continue to grow. The following morning, Kalu decided it was time to take the next step. He could no longer only observe. He needed evidence that could not be ignored. He returned to the abandoned building at the edge of town. Hiding behind thick bushes and watching the followers gather, the man he had seen before arrived with several new recruits, handing out folded papers and speaking quietly. His voice carrying authority, even without a Bible. Kalu memorized every word, every gesture, every detail. He sketched maps of the building and its exits in his notebook, noting where people sat, where doors opened, and how shadows moved across the walls. That evening, he met Adaeze messenger at a secret spot near the river, where no one could see them. "Kalu," the messenger whispered, handing him a small package. "This has proof of the hidden letters and plans Pastor Daniel left behind before he was arrested. Keep it safe." Kalu took the bundle carefully. Feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than ever, he opened it quietly in his room, revealing folded pages filled with twisted scriptures, instructions for followers, and lists of names of people being recruited. The handwriting was clear, deliberate, manipulative. Kalu's stomach turned. He realized that the evil had not ended. It had only changed form. He met with Naji later that night, showing him the new evidence. "This confirms everything we feared," Naji said gravely. "It is proof beyond doubt. But it is dangerous. Anyone who sees these papers will try to destroy them or discredit you." Kalu nodded. "We have to stop them," he said quietly. "Even if it means going further than before." Naji placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and firm. "Then we do it carefully, step by step. The truth must be strong enough to survive fear." Outside, the wind whistled through the trees, rustling leaves against the walls of the old church. Kalu stared at the darkness and realized that the fight had only begun. The shadows of lies stretched far beyond Eziama, but now he held the first light. The next morning, Kalu began planning carefully. He could not confront the followers directly. He needed proof that would survive scrutiny. He studied the abandoned building, noting every exit, every hidden corner, every sound that might betray him. He practiced moving silently, pretending to walk casually while his eyes scanned for anything unusual. Each day, he added more details to his notebook, drawing diagrams of rooms and entrances, and writing down everything the followers said when they thought no one was listening. Adaeze's letters continued to arrive, each one urging caution and patience. "Do not risk yourself alone," she warned. "Use your mind, not just courage. You are clever, Kalu, but they are dangerous." One afternoon, Kalu spotted a follower carrying a small satchel of papers into a hidden room at the back of the abandoned building. He waited until nightfall, then returned with Naji under the cover of darkness. They approached the building carefully, hearts pounding. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves sounded like a warning. Kalu held his breath as they slipped inside. The room was small and dimly lit, but the papers were stacked neatly on a table, exactly as he had imagined. They contained more instructions, lists, and twisted verses meant to manipulate families and children in nearby towns. Naji studied the papers and nodded. "This is enough," he said quietly. "With this, the authorities cannot ignore the truth." "You have done well, Kalu." Kalu felt relief, but it was mixed with unease. He knew this evidence could stop the followers, but it also meant exposing the full extent of Pastor Daniel's manipulation, and that would shake Eziama to its core. As they left, Kalu glanced back at the building. The shadows seemed alive, stretching toward him like tendrils. He realized that uncovering evil was not the end. It only revealed the next battle, and that battle would require courage, patience, and unwavering truth. He clutched the papers tightly, knowing that the town's safety and the safety of many children depended on the careful steps he and Naji would take next. The next morning, Kalu and Naji delivered the papers to the local authorities discreetly. The officers examined them carefully, nodding as they read through the twisted instructions. The lists of followers and the manipulation plans, Adaeze proof, combined with Kalu's observations, painted a clear picture of how Pastor Daniel's influence had spread even after his arrest. The authorities promised swift action, warning Kalu and Naji to stay safe. The boy felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Back in Eziama, whispers began circulating about the hidden network that had been uncovered. Some people were shocked, others were angry, blaming those who had exposed the truth. In the marketplace, families argued quietly about who had known what and when. The church bell remained silent, a constant reminder of the town's broken trust. Kalu felt eyes on him wherever he went. Some admired him, some feared him, and some still whispered that he had brought shame to the community. That evening, Adaeze returned to Eziama quietly, moving cautiously past the boarded-up church. She hugged Kalu tightly. "You did this," she whispered. "You exposed the lies. You saved lives." Kalu shook his head. "I only followed the truth," he said. "I only listened when the world was silent." Naji joined them, placing a steady hand on Kalu's shoulder. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is acting even when fear is present. You have done more than anyone could have expected." Child, Kalu realized that the town would never forget what had happened. The church, the hidden rooms, the chains, the misuse of scripture, it was all a part of Eziama's history now. As night fell, Kalu walked past the church one last time for the evening. He glanced at the boarded doors, imagining the hidden rooms beneath. The shadows of the past lingered. But now the town had light on its side. The boy understood that truth, once discovered, could not be hidden again. And though the shadows remained, courage had planted its roots firmly in Eziama. The following days were tense but hopeful. Eziama was slowly waking from the fear that had ruled it for years. Parents spoke openly to children about obedience and questioning. They no longer accepted authority without thought. Adaeze returned to school, still fragile but determined to live her life fully. Kalu stayed close to her, making sure she felt safe, and continued to document the changes in the town. The authorities began visiting the abandoned buildings and speaking with followers of Pastor Daniel. Some were cooperative, others silent and suspicious. Kalu realized that fear still lingered in corners of the town, but it had lost much of its power. Those who had once bowed unquestioningly now hesitated, listened, and began to ask questions. The church doors remained closed, the bells silent, but the town slowly learned that faith could exist without fear. One afternoon, Naji gathered Kalu and a few trusted townspeople in a quiet room. "The shadow is not entirely gone," he said. "Even after Pastor Daniel is gone, there are those who cling to lies. But the seeds of truth you have planted will grow stronger if nurtured." Kalu listened carefully, understanding that his work was not finished. That evening, he and Adaeze walked past the church together, staring at the tall cross still silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Do you think people will ever fully trust again?" she asked softly. Kalu shook his head. "Maybe not fully, but they will learn to question, to watch, and to protect themselves. That is more important than blind trust." The wind blew softly across the town, rustling the leaves of the trees near the church. The shadows of the past lingered, but for the first time, Kalu could see a light spreading across Eziama, a light born not from a bell or a sermon, but from courage, truth, and the refusal to stay silent. Weeks turned into months, and Eziama slowly began to rebuild itself. Parents taught their children about safety, faith, and the importance of asking questions. Parents who had blindly followed Pastor Daniel began to speak openly about mistakes and lessons learned. Kalu spent his days helping Adaeze regain confidence and courage, and at night he wrote in his notebook, recording the events that had changed the town forever. Some townspeople still whispered about him, some admired him, and some were wary. They had seen the power of silence and manipulation, and now they saw the strength of a single voice speaking the truth. Kalu realized that fear had been a weapon, and courage was the only shield against it. One evening, he met with Naji again, this time in the quiet courtyard of Kalu's home. "The work is far from over," Naji said gently. "Truth is strong, but lies are patient. They wait for carelessness." Kalu nodded. "I understand. But people are learning. They won't be silent forever." Adaeze joined them, holding Kalu's hand. "You showed us that even a child can make a difference," she said softly. "Even when the world is afraid, courage can change everything." Kalu felt a small spark of hope ignite in his chest. He knew that the shadows of Pastor Daniel's lies would linger for years. But he also knew that Eziama had learned the most important lesson. Blind faith without understanding could hide terrible secrets. But questioning, observing, and acting with truth could bring them into the light. That night, as Kalu lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling. Thinking about the hidden rooms, the chains, and the cold air beneath the church, he thought of the faces of those who had suffered and the faces of those who had begun to heal. He understood that darkness could hide in many forms. But courage, truth, and vigilance could shine brighter than fear, and that knowledge would guide him for the rest of his life. By the following month, Eziama was slowly changing. Parents spoke openly to their children about asking questions, about noticing what felt wrong, and about trusting truth over fear. The marketplace buzzed again. But now conversations included caution and wisdom. People had learned to observe, to listen, and to think for themselves. The church bell remained silent, a reminder of the town's past, but it no longer cast fear. Kalu continued his careful watch. He still observed, recorded, and planned, knowing that shadows could return at any time. Each day, he checked on Adaeze and her family, making sure they felt safe. He also began teaching younger children how to notice signs of manipulation, how to ask questions, and how to stay safe without fear. He realized that education and awareness were stronger than any punishment for wrongdoing. One evening, Naji spoke to him under the stars. "The work you've done will ripple through this town for years," he said. "Some people will still try to hide truth behind fear, but now there are eyes to see it and voices to speak it. That is the best protection." Kalu nodded, thinking of the hidden room beneath the church, the chains, and the fear that had ruled so many lives. He understood now that truth was not a one-time victory. It required constant vigilance, patience, and courage. As he walked home that night, the shadows of the old church stretched long across the streets. But Kalu felt no fear. The past had been revealed, lies had been exposed, and a new generation in Eziama was learning that courage and truth could survive even the darkest shadows. And somewhere deep in his heart, Kalu knew that the town would never again allow a secret like that to hide behind holy words. Months passed, and the town began to breathe more freely. The fear that had clung to every corner was fading, replaced by cautious hope. Teachers spoke openly about ethics and honesty, and children learned that questioning did not mean disobedience. Adaeze returned fully to her life, attending school, laughing with friends, and even helping other children who had been affected by Pastor Daniel's lies. Kalu continued to watch quietly, documenting every change and every new lesson the town learned. He realized that true courage was not always loud. It often worked in silence, in observation, in small acts of care and protection. His notebook, once filled with fear and discovery, now contained strategies for teaching others how to protect themselves from manipulation and deceit. One afternoon, he met with Naji in the town square. "People are learning," Naji said, smiling faintly. "The lies cannot take root as deeply when the truth is visible. You have done more than anyone expected, Kalu." Kalu shook his head humbly. "I only followed what I saw. I only listened." That night, as he walked past the old church, he noticed that even in darkness, the building seemed smaller somehow. The shadow of lies that had once spread through the town now seemed trapped behind boarded doors and locked windows. The air felt lighter, and Kalu understood that, while fear could return, the courage and knowledge planted in Eziama would remain. He thought of Adaeze, of the hidden room, of the chains, and of every secret the town had uncovered. For the first time, Kalu allowed himself a small smile. The town had survived darkness, and the people were beginning to reclaim their voices, their faith, and their lives. The lesson was clear. When fear hides behind sacred words, courage and truth must be louder. By the end of the year, Eziama had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Children no longer feared speaking up, and adults began to admit mistakes openly. Some families returned to the closed church, not to pray, but to witness the place where lies had been hidden, and to remind themselves that vigilance was necessary. Kalu and Adaeze spent long afternoons sharing their story quietly with small groups of children and teenagers. They explained how obedience without thought could be dangerous, how fear could twist faith, and how courage even from a child could expose truth. They taught lessons about listening carefully, asking questions, and noticing when something felt wrong. Everyone learned that faith alone could not protect them if it was blind or misused. Naji often watched them, smiling proudly. "You have done more than you know," he told Kalu one evening. "The town is learning to see, and that is stronger than any sermon." Kalu nodded, thinking about all he had witnessed at the hidden room beneath the church, the chains, the manipulation, and the fear. He realized that knowledge and courage could build a shield stronger than any walls or locked doors. That night, Kalu walked past the old church again. Feeling the cool wind against his face, he remembered how small and powerless he had felt at first, how fear had tried to silence him. But he also remembered how truth had guided him, and how one voice could awaken a whole town. He looked up at the dark silhouette of the church and whispered quietly, "No more secrets. No more fear." For the first time in years, the shadow of the past seemed lighter. The people of Eziama were learning, slowly but surely, that darkness could be exposed and that courage, once sparked, could never be extinguished. The following morning, Eziama woke to a quiet that felt different, not fearful, but expectant. Children ran through the streets, asking questions freely, their laughter filling spaces that had long been silent. Adults spoke to one another openly, admitting mistakes and teaching lessons they had once hidden behind fear and tradition. Kalu walked among them, carrying his notebook, now filled with every detail of the past months. Every secret uncovered, every lesson learned. Adaeze joined him, smiling brightly. "Look," she said, pointing to a group of children practicing reading aloud. "They are learning. They are not afraid anymore." Kalu nodded, watching the young faces, curious and alert. Noticing things their parents might have overlooked, he realized that the town's strength no longer relied on sermons, bells, or even the authority of the church. Their strength came from awareness, courage, and the refusal to let fear rule again. Naji approached, his eyes soft but proud. "You have done more than anyone imagined, Kalu," he said. "You have shown that truth and courage can change hearts, even when darkness hides behind holy words." Kalu felt the weight of his journey settle, not as a burden, but as a quiet triumph. He had faced fear, uncovered secrets, and helped a town reclaim its voice. As the sun rose over Eziama, shining on the closed church and the streets below, Kalu understood something profound. The Bible, faith, or authority could never hide evil if people learned to see clearly, question carefully, and act bravely. And so the town began to heal, not because fear had ended, but because truth had been found, courage had grown, and one boy had refused to stay silent. The shadows of lies had been exposed. And for the first time in years, Eziama knew that no secret, no matter how deeply hidden, could survive forever.